Hello, welcome to the show. I have a special guest with me today, Jimmy Vallee. We are going to talk about some things that have been heating up on Twitter lately. Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
Hey, Molly, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. It has been a feisty couple of days. Would you agree?
It has. It has.
And I think we wanted to take the time to kind of clear up some misperceptions and confusion, and figured it would be easier to actually do that on video than trying to write threads and tweets on Twitter that can, or the tone can be misinterpreted. Do you agree?
I agree. And thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Sure. So a couple of days ago, a document that you created a couple months ago was shared this weekend, and there was some kind of frustration and even anger about some of the items in this document, which we're going to call the proposed terms.
Okay.
And so we're actually going to break those down for anybody watching to clarify what some of the legal jargon means, because we don't all speak legalese, and Jimmy's going to interpret that for us. But before we get into that, for people who are kind of got into this a little bit late in the game, can you please kind of tell everybody just at a high level, why are you doing all of this? Where did this come from?
Well, so this really comes from the fact that I spent the majority of my professional career as a corporate securities lawyer doing M&A transactions exactly like what's being proposed in the terms. I was an XRP holder starting in kind of, spring of 2020,
Okay.
and had done a tremendous amount of research on XRP, all digital assets really, but XRP was kind of one that I really thought had a ton of promise to resolve a lot of problems in the global financial system. So I was very bullish on its future utility to be used to solve a lot of big problems that I think we're seeing play out in the global economy right now.
Okay.
So when the lawsuit happened, I was taken aback. We had already had the Bill Hinman speech in 2018. I certainly thought that to the extent XRP could ever be construed as a security, that the decentralization component that the SEC was enunciating back in 2018 and continued all the way up through 2020 during Clayton's regime certainly would be applicable. So when the lawsuit was filed and Jay Clayton left the very next day, I was very taken aback. I thought it was wrong. And it really sent off a lot of alarm bells in me. And so I started to really dig into it. And the more I dug into it, the more strange everything got. We quickly kind of put all the pieces together around ETHgate, around Consensus's involvement, around JP Morgan's involvement with Consensus. We were concerned that acting Chairman Lee kind of changed up some rules regarding settlement that would have otherwise been was applicable in Kick Interactive. So by the summer of 2021, I was very concerned that we could not get a fair shake from the government, that really the government had engaged in a process that continues to this very day to try to take the asset, try to take the XRP.
And what does that mean? How, if I own the XRP, it's in my wallet, how are they taking it?
So in our opinion, the strategy that they're employing is effectively a regulatory capture strategy, and that is to create so much lack of clarity in the regulatory environment that other uses, like institutional uses, are not possible. When big institutions make investments in things like digital assets, like you had Paul Tudor Jones, you had a bunch of people invest in Bitcoin, and people came out and said, oh, you should allocate 2% of your portfolio to Bitcoin. Those types of things, those principles in these funds and in these institutions they have a fiduciary duty to their investors to make sure that the regulatory environment is clear. If there is the potential for the digital asset to be declared a security after the fact, and that could potentially dramatically undermine the use case of the asset, which is the case here, they basically are frozen out of that market. They can't come into that market. And that's the way things are even to this day. So we saw the lawsuit being used as a weapon against retail holders to try to basically squeeze us out and make us burp it up over time. For example, Vallee had a much larger holding of XRP when the lawsuit was filed than we hold today. And it's because we've had to consume XRP in paying executives, paying expenses and things like that, that otherwise we should have been able to use it at a higher value if the free market was truly allowed to run.
So knowing that you sort of spotted this situation that didn't really make a lot of sense, why did you choose to go this route of kind of creating this term sheet or offer and sending that initially to the Fed?
Yeah, so it was a really good question. I guess the reason is that I had the skills so as I mentioned, I spent my career at big law firms, doing very large M&A transactions. I think I've done it's been over $100 billion in M&A transactions that I've done in my career. So I know how to write the language in the lawyer speak. I know how to structure these types of transactions. I've led them. I've executed them. So it was a very frustrating situation to be someone who had been impacted so significantly by the government's action and kind of feel that helplessness that there's what do I do? What can I do about it? And it turns out I've got these skills. And I thought that, initially I was like, I could just rough out the terms and it'll kind of just be for me, almost like a thought exercise. And, after I roughed them out and I shared them with the gang and they're like, yeah, we should move forward with this. That then started moving into creating the committee to evaluate it and ultimately led to our initial proposals to the Fed.
So you initially just had a group of people that you knew or a friend of a friend type thing. You guys met and you sent this document and it was decided right among your group that you would just keep that as a private arrangement with the Fed at that point. Is that correct?
That's right. Initially, our idea kind of internally at Vallee was to have it done in a more public format. Okay. I mean, this whole thing to us is really about bringing the people out of the back rooms and let's negotiate this in front of everybody.
Okay.
Which is, I think,
that's kind of what happened with Twitter
this weekend. Is that what you mean? Oh, with no, Twitter.
It's sort of this negotiation of a deal in the public marketplace.
Well, sort of. So Twitter was a deal that kind of started out in a hostile manner. And so there's a couple of ways that these transactions get initiated. Okay. There's a friendly way to do it, and there's a hostile way to do it. Okay. The friendly way is somebody has an idea to buy a target company, let's call it Twitter, and they call up the CEO and they say, I'd like to buy Twitter for, it's trading at $43 a share now. I'd like to buy it for $54.20. Okay. And depending on that recipient's reaction, is kind of where it goes from there. If it's friendly, they say, you know what, that sounds like a really fair price. Let me talk it over with the board. Okay. And if the board agrees with this, let's get the lawyers and the bankers involved and let's start moving forward to do a deal. And they basically work together to bring the deal about. That's a friendly transaction. Okay. The other way this happens is that, and this happened more back in the 80s, kind of during the takeover time, is that you that same first phone call, hey, I want to buy Twitter at $54.20. It's trading at 43 now. It's a huge premium to your stockholders. And the executive on the other line who's receiving that call says, piss off. We're not selling. And so then the party that's proposing the transaction kind of has one of two choices. They can say, okay, well, they're not interested. We're not going to pursue that. Or they can kind of take the offer directly to the stockholders, who are the people who really have the investment in the business. They're the true owners of the business. And you can do this one of two ways. You can do a tender offer, which is to basically formally make an offer to the public, all with the appropriate legal documents and everything, and give a certain amount of time for people to tender their shares in and get paid. And you can even have conditions. I'm not going to close the transaction unless I get 90% of the shares or something like that. You can have those conditions in your tender offer. The other way, which is more of the kind of bully hazing kind of way to do, is called you basically do a bear hug letter.
Okay.
And so what that means is basically like that offer that I initially made to the CEO of Twitter in this case, in our what we're talking about. I just write that offer down on a letter and I send the letter to them, say, we had this conversation yesterday and I made this offer of this, and I'm just formally putting it in writing. And at the same time, I basically give it to the Wall Street Journal and say, I just made this offer to the executive management of Twitter. That's effectively what Elon did, right?
Okay.
He basically then took it to that step of kind of making the deal public. And then what happens is you have the rise of the stockholders. So they read about it in the Wall Street Journal and they say, oh, that's a damn good deal. I want that 54.20. It's trading at 43. Why didn't you do that deal? And so now they're calling the board members and the executive management and say, you go do that deal. And that's effectively what happened. The stockholders rose up in Twitter and basically started directing the management that was trying to entrench themselves. And we've learned a lot of things through that Twitter project about reasons that board members may have wanted to be there directing, say, the narrative out of Twitter, but didn't even really have any stock. They weren't like really, they weren't financially incentivized in the right way. They were there for other reasons. So that's more of the hostile approach. So initially we kind of wanted to do that bear hug approach. We wanted to send the thing in, send the proposal in, and basically publish it at the same time.
Okay.
There were other members on the committee that, as we talked about that strategy, they really thought that the odds of us pulling off something like this with just kind of the group we had was better if we kept it private, that there would be a desire from the government to basically like, we want to keep this quiet. We're just going to pay these people. And there's precedent for this. There have been people that have invented, transformational intellectual property. They have patents on things that are, call it a new weapons system or, more recently, a vaccine. And they'll strike a deal with the government that we don't know about, and the government will basically buy that intellectual property, or they'll joint venture. This is exactly what happened with Moderna. Moderna did a joint venture with the U.S. government, and then they put confidentiality restrictions where the government couldn't disclose that they had done it, and the company, the Moderna, wouldn't talk about it either. All that's bubbled up since, but these things happen, right? They happen all the time, that there's some asset or technology or intellectual property that the government wants to get a hold of for some reason, because it's a strategic imperative that they have control of it. And these types of deals happen. So there were people thinking that maybe this was one of those cases where, basically having us out of the market, not talking about it, would be a desire for the government. And but ultimately we didn't hear back from the government. So that the initiative was sent on September 13th, 2021. And then we basically re-upped on October 29th and gave them till November the 5th to start engaging with us, and basically said, if we haven't heard from you by November 5th, then we're going to basically let the public know that we've offered this deal to you, right? Or proposed this type of a transaction. And that's when it was after that the first, we published initially that 2021 version of the term sheet. We only envisioned one buyer at that time, and that was the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve we saw as kind of the head of the banking system in the United States. They were the ones who could make the most use of the XRP. We carbon copied the Treasury in connection with that, but it was very much a U.S. thing. In this iteration, is if people read kind of the top part of the document, we're envisioning kind of a more international type of a thing where we would propose it to the World Bank, the IMF. Somebody's recently suggested even the BIS. So I think we may, in the next turn of the draft, we may have the BIS included as well.
Okay. So is the underlying premise behind this whole initiative that the financial system has plans for XRP that they have not disclosed to us?
We believe that's the motives behind the SEC's actions.
Okay.
And we believe it goes back to pre-Hinman speech that there are leaders and officials in or who've passed through our government that know what the plans are for our government's use and other governments' use of XRP and the XRPL kind of in the new quantum financial system. But that they, instead of allowing the market to just kind of naturally progress towards that system, that there were certain people, maybe only like 5% of people who've actually been in government who basically said, you know what, we're going to try to front run that and effectively steal it for a song. And initially it manifested as the Hinman speech. That didn't slow it down enough. So by the time, there was a bull run starting for XRP in November of 2020. And probably it would have gone on to surpass its all-time high. It would have maybe even gone up into the $10, $20 range at that time. We'll never know because of the action. But, obviously the lawsuit got filed.
So is the idea at this point that the first effort to do it privately didn't get the result that you wanted? So now this phase 2 is let's expand the community of people involved. Almost a little bit like how a class action lawsuit, like the more people involved, the more likely you are to get the outcome you want.
That's right. In fact, I think I saw someone this weekend said, they've realized if they can get enough of the chickens to squawk, the farmer might notice. And that's really the approach. Ultimately, we don't think the government wants to, it's clear with the SEC's tactics to try to prevent the public release of the Hinman emails and memos and documents and all the deliberation type stuff that went along with whatever happened back then. They're trying to hide something. And, only Ripple's seen them at this point. And obviously, Brad Garlinghouse and Stuart Alderoty have come out and said, we'll be shocked when we see what happens. I think it's probably pretty bad. I think it's we have a couple of different scenarios that we've batted around about what could happen, but it's probably pretty bad, and it probably goes beyond the SEC. It probably goes right up into the people who are able to direct policy at the SEC, which is basically the legacy banking system, people who are involved in underwriting securities now, who have the most to lose.
There's a lot of skepticism, and I will admit I have this too, that any entity like the Fed or the IMF would give people like me all this money. Is there sort of a scenario that you can see that would actually be better for them than another alternative?
Yes, I see this is going one of two ways. Either this is going to continue until all of the information bubbles up and becomes publicly known. Think about it like a Hunter Biden laptop type situation. Okay. That, it's either going to ultimately become known, and that's going to be very bad, potentially in the SEC type of bad. Like it may be that the institution is so corrupt that we'll just, as a society, as a collective, decide we don't need that type of regulatory agency anymore. So we'll completely lose all faith and credit of what it does. So that's one path I see, which they're kind of keep pushing down that path right now. And I think Congress is kind of playing along with it. In the library case, they've got at least one federal judge to kind of go along with it. In his order for motion of summary judgment, I think is a very poor decision by that judge. The other path is some type of resolution, right? It's okay, we actually harmed a lot of people. We need to acknowledge that. We need to put the lawsuit to bed. We need to compensate the people who have been harmed. The term sheet actually addresses this very directly, and there's a damages section about people who had to sell to go on with living expenses and business expenses and things like that.
Okay.
We need to be made whole for this damage. I mean, I don't think anybody in the community would argue that the SEC's actions, which is the federal government's actions, have significantly damaged not only the holders of XRP, but really the whole entire crypto landscape, the whole digital asset sector. More than that, what the developers, I think, also appreciate is that VCs, institutional money is not coming into the space to develop new use cases for these assets because there's so much regulatory uncertainty. It has effectively frozen investment into the market. And that's keeping firms like ours from really like digging in. I mean, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to basically grow with this asset, start building all these different use cases. You've heard about Delta Wave and things like that we've done. And start using NFTs in capital markets. That's a perfect use case. Embodying financial instruments into NFTs and having those be tokenized and tradable is a perfect use case for blockchain technology. All of this is being prohibited because of this situation. So the damages are significant. They're material. I think we all feel the trauma of having to go through these past 2 years. There have been people who've lost everything. There were people who were liquidated on the day the lawsuit was filed because they had leverage on Nexo or some of these other platforms, and they were using their XRP as collateral. When that lawsuit occurred, they lost everything. Their entire account was liquidated. So these stories are real. We've experienced them personally, and it is a big part of basically making sure the government knows what they've done. Which is, this is a piece to do that.
Part of my role with this project is to work on these valuation models and kind of share them. And it's been strange to see the sort of anger and hostility when we've talked about these various financial models. Do you think that this same reaction would have happened if we were forecasting more financial models for Avalanche or Dogecoin?
Hard to say. I don't think so. I think it's because of the trauma that we've all experienced these past 2 years. It's been hell, right? I mean, not only do we have the government come out, the government who's supposedly there to protect us, right, has been weaponized against us. But to be an XRP holder and live through the onslaught of Bitcoin maximalists and all these people, all the FUD thrown at us on a variety of different things. In fact, people are saying that the buyback is one of those things now, which, that hurts to hear, but, I get it.
It's made people kind of jaded and distrustful.
Yeah. We all got to go back to the big picture, right? The big picture is XRP is going to increase in value when we use it. When we have more and more use cases come on Ledger, more and more projects, that is not going to happen until we have more clarity in the space. And the healing will not occur until the sins of the past have been somewhat addressed and rectified. Doesn't have to be everything, but it has to be acknowledged and rectified for anybody to move forward. So back to your initial question, I think because of that trauma that we've all experienced, people are very charged. There is this kind of, I'm going to take my XRP and bury it in the backyard. I'm taking my Ledger Nano, I'm putting it in a jar, I'm going to bury it in the backyard, and I'll dig it up every now and then and kind of take a look at it and then put it right back in, it's like the precious, in Lord of the Rings. But that's not going to make XRP be used for what it's intended to do, which is move all the value on the internet of value. We need to basically free up that liquidity. We need to start putting that into the system. And, I think we all lose track of the fact that this isn't really just our problem. It's the governments and the central banks and the very top level, the elites of the world who are tied in with the running of the financial system also have super big problems. The debt is stratospheric. As interest rates have risen, some of the people can't pay those debts, right? They lived in a world of basically free money so long. They're basically structured and engineered based on a free money business model that has suddenly evaporated. And so you've got a lot of people who you wouldn't think would be kind of on your side, who are actually kind of on your side. Like, oh, if we could figure out a way to offset these liabilities in a way that's fair, I think a lot of people would actually kind of lean into it. We actually get, as much as we get the blowback on Twitter and stuff, we get a lot of emails and I get LinkedIn messages from people who are in other countries basically saying, keep going. We're having conversations with central banks. The liquidity crisis is real. They don't know what to do. Keep this narrative going because it might actually lead to the solution. We don't know if the buyback is the solution, right? I mean, it probably isn't. There's probably a dozen ways to solve this. However, these other elements I talked about, the regulatory clarity, the ending of the lawsuit, the rectifying the damages caused by weaponizing faculties of the U.S. government against people need to be resolved, or it's going to be very hard for us ever to trust the government ever again. I mean, we've been through a very, very bad 3 years in the people's relationship with the government, with the COVID, with the vaccine thing, with the Great Reset narrative coming out of the World Economic Forum. You'll own nothing and be happy. This is, it's weird. And we need to snap back into normality where we can begin to trust people again. Humanity needs to unite around this concept and find a way to move forward, or there will not be governments the way we have had governments in the past if they continue down this path. It's just not gonna be sustainable.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about the actual document itself, because that seemed to create some real heat and I think from misunderstanding some of the items in there because they're written in legalese. So the first thing is that when you wrote that, you obviously didn't write it in normal way we speak. You wrote it in legal jargon. Who is the intended recipient for that, and why did you make that choice?
Right. So we're using the language of business and corporate law. Okay. So it is written in legalese. It's written the way we write term sheets and legal documents. A lot of run-on sentences, a lot of parenthetical thoughts, these types of things, which are very hard even for lawyers to follow, frankly. Right. But the intended audience, that's the language they speak. It's the intended audience isn't really crypto Twitter, although at some point all of this, if it were to happen, would be distilled into a communication to all potential participants in the transaction but it'd be more like when you get a class action settlement type of a document, or a like if anybody's ever held stock in a company that's had a merger with someone that you've had to vote, and you get like the financial document, and it's got like a proxy statement that you have to check and send back in, it's like your vote, that type of thing. So, if this were to go the whole way, there would be that whole part of the process as well. This was like the initial straw man, hey, what if we did something like this that was communicated to very sophisticated bankers and attorneys who know this language very, very well, and to start a conversation.
There was some items in there that seemed weird to people, that almost were like, could be construed as an inside joke or a bit of a taunt to kind of reference some strange things. Can you just kind of high level explain what that's all about?
Well, I'm glad you asked about that, because I think what you're getting at is, so we've got this success fee provision. Okay. And this draft that everyone's looking at is from December 26th. We're living in a post FTX failure, post Celsius, post Voyager world.
Okay.
But FTX in particular, it's basically come out that, the way he got access to all these different officials was by making political donations, right?
Okay.
So there's a long list of people that either, Sam Bankman-Fried himself or FTX, the company, had paid all these different people, both sides of the aisle. By the way, this isn't a red, blue, Republican, Democrat issue. He paid everybody.
So by including that stuff, you weren't advocating for those things, were you?
I think it was acknowledging to the recipients of that proposal.
Okay.
Is this what it takes? Is this what it takes? We have to actually pay you people to do the right thing. And so one of the payments that you referred, kind of like a little joke. It's a joke, but it's not. It's kind of horrifying, really, that, we called it the Congressional Cooperation Payment. So the CCP payment, right? So there's that one.
An Eastgate reference?
An Eastgate reference, yeah. Among other things. I mean, didn't we just have a Chinese
balloon thing?
Their balloon float across the United States, taking pictures of basically everything? I don't know what it was doing. We shot it down once it got to the other side, but we let it track across the whole country before we did anything. Anyway, so there's that. And then there was the I think it's called the Federal Regulatory Distribution, which the acronym for that would be fraud. So you got the CCP and fraud. So yeah, it was a little like, we see what you're doing type of communication. But by the way, we haven't actually done anything, right? It's just words on a page. We haven't called anybody and bribed anybody or offered anybody any payments, right? It was just hey, is this what it takes to get stuff done in our country now with our government?
I think some people have also seen that document and concluded that this is like the deal. How would you describe what this document is kind of in the long-term goal or process?
I'd say for this type of transaction to happen, it's probably 30 steps, and this is step 1.
Okay.
Right. Step 2 would be a phone call. Hey, from the other side, hey, why don't we talk about this? Why don't we try to work something out here? To which all of this, really the whole point is that it happens out in the open. So, where we would have gone, but for the leak that occurred, I mean, this was all going to be out and discussed among the broader community anyway. So in hindsight, it's not a horrible thing that, it got leaked and that we're actually having the conversation. It's just a draft though, is the issue. So it's not completely baked, and we're evolving the terms a little bit based on feedback that we've been getting. For example, one of the things that has been criticized over the weekend was this like, oh my God, you're going to give Vallee your keys and your crypto, and then it's going to be locked up with them and all this stuff. Like, Vallee doesn't want any of that. We don't want your keys or crypto. We're not asking you to send us your keys or your crypto. The structure that's in the current draft is basically like an escrow type of a thing where, the buyer's putting the money in, the person's putting their XRP in, and then it's basically distributed accordingly. We've already heard that that's probably because there's an NFT kind of component of that. We've heard from people who are much better on the technology side than we are, that that's probably not the best way to do it. Maybe you could have a trust line process where instead of actually tendering your XRP in, you say, I want to participate, and you just trust line in with your XRP, and then the buyer is able to see who's trying to participate and who needs to get paid, how much consideration has to be paid out, and that type of a thing, which is going to be a necessary element of it. But
so the idea is that
very clear. We have never one time said to send Vallee your XRP or your keys. We do not want to be in that position. That's one thing I want to clear. The second thing I want to make clear is that whatever the structure turns out to be, I am 100% committed to make sure it is the safest way to implement this transaction in a way that there really is no risk of the types of concerns that are being raised on Twitter right now, of losing your XRP or anything like that. You're going to get paid if you participate 100%. That's why we're hiring all the lawyers and bankers and people to basically make sure that this is collateralized property. It's done in the right way.
Because I think there's concern that we've sort of internalized this not your keys, not your crypto idea, that if I don't physically hold the device that has the access to my crypto on the blockchain, then it's sort of at risk. So how would a custody arrangement be different than storing it on a central exchange?
Well, other than the fact it's kind of like you're putting your XRP on the exchange right at that instant to basically have the transaction occur, which is no different. I mean, I assume people are relatively familiar with buying and selling.
I think they more mean like people who got burned from Voyager. They had a bunch of crypto on Voyager. Voyager
so
goes under.
This isn't like a stick your crypto on exchange to make a yield that's going to go on for 6 months or a year. This is like all in connection with the closing. You'd be putting, in this case, maybe you'd be trust lining in, which isn't putting anything at risk, right? Still sitting in your wallet. But in the current draft that people are looking at, even that was all happening in connection with the closing. No different than when you escrow money, in connection with the buying and selling of a house, right? You basically go to the title company, they fund in to the escrow. The escrow sends out attorney's fees, appraiser fees, all the different, in the settlement statement, all that different stuff. And then they pay the seller the balance of the proceeds by wire transfer. That it was going to happen in a very similar type of format.
Another thing that came up over the weekend was the discussion of the $100 million fee that I think just sounds like so much money, which sounds like so much money to me. What would that money be for?
So the $100 million is not a fee. That is a reimbursement of expenses, and it's an estimate of what we think the expenses will be at the end of the transaction.
Okay.
So by way of comparison, Ripple has said that they will have spent about $100 million on legal fees alone in defending the SEC lawsuit when it's all said and done. Okay. Lawyers.
Is that an expense that will be covered, lawyers for this deal?
Yes. As a matter of fact, this is tangential to the topic, but there's even a provision in there that provides for basically the setting up of a fund for individual token holders to get their own legal counsel and get paid their own legal fees out of that as well.
Okay.
So the $100 million is really for your legal fee. It's for like the group's legal fees, accounting fees, and any kind of banking work, stuff like that. All the professional fees that are going to be necessary for lawyers to document, to audit whether the cash consideration is actually collateralized or asset backed, which we're requesting. We're requesting a sound money type monetary instrument or sound money currency be paid cash consideration. So we got to prove all that up. I mean, we can't just like say, okay, yeah, we'll take whatever you say your ESDR is. We're going to have a team go to Geneva or all over the world and like actually figure out, yes, there's that goal that supports this ESDR, and that's what's basically backing the money that's happening in this deal. That's all. It's kind of customary due diligence. It's the type of thing that if it'd be like if you were acquiring a company or doing a merger, you would send a team of people out to make sure that the representations being made in the documents are actually true, right? So they're going to look at financial statements. They're going to look at inventory reports. If you're buying, an airline, let me see all the planes. I want to see all the, all the little machines that go fill up the planes and all that kind of equipment and all that kind of stuff.
So that $100 million, just that number, is really to pay for all of these people who will be employed in the servicing of this deal. It's not like Jimmy's
on behalf of the participating token holders. Yeah,
correct. Okay.
The buyer would have their own, or the buyers would have their own attorneys as well. They have to basically incur those expenses for themselves. And then, as I said, it could be probably the confidential committee probably ends up with its own counsel that has to be paid for out of that 100 million. And then there's another fund being set up for that. All of this is, by the way, is being paid by the buyer. This is an expense-free, tax-free, debt-free deal to any participating token holder. I don't know if they've.
So to make that clear, if I'm a participating token holder and I sell my XRP in exchange for some form of money, does that, do I have to chip into this $100 million with my money?
No. You get the whole 100% of what the purchase price of your XRP was.
And was that clearly outlined in the document?
I think so. So I've got it right here. Let's just go to that section. So it's, Vallee and the members of the confidential committee shall be entitled to reimbursement for all expenses reasonably incurred in connection with its and their due diligence, structuring, evaluation, and implementation of the transaction, which amount is currently estimated to be 100 million in the aggregate, the form of which, here's the key part, will be reimbursed by the USA Corporation, which is kind of the definition of all the governmental entities that are the buyer, to Vallee or any such members of the confidential committee in ESDRs. So
to be clear, the fees, the money coming to XRP token holders who choose to sell is totally separate from these expenses that will be incurred and reimbursed on behalf of people working on this.
That's correct. It does not work like selling your house and paying a real estate agent, right? So when you sell your house, I think the market for real estate agents is basically 6%, and the listing agent, which is like the sell side agent, gets 3%, and the buy side agent, or the person who actually sells the house, brings a buyer in and sells the house, gets 3%. That's kind of market. So that reduces what the seller gets paid. So instead of getting a whole 100%, you're only getting 94% of the amount that was paid as the purchase price. This is different. These fees and expenses are added on top of what's negotiated for the amount the XRP token holders are to be paid. And, these fees will probably be negotiated by the buyer as well. They'll be like, look, because this is the largest transaction, I mean, a 1% fee, there's like Vallee's fee is like, that's a big number, right? It's probably bigger than 100 million if we actually had every retail holder participate. It's a big number. I think they'd be like, it's too much, but that's really for them to negotiate. We're actually, I think if you think about what market is for those types of fees for the people acting in the capacity that we're acting, it's typically a 3 to 5% of the whole deal. And we've set it at 1%, recognizing that the transaction's so large.
Okay. Another question is, it's unlikely that all the XRP retail holders in the world would participate. Some of them just won't have any idea about this. Some of them will choose not to. One question or accusation I've had to field is that those who don't participate will somehow be harmed by this. What would be your thoughts on that?
So it kind of depends what the buyer wants to do after this transaction. If the buyer is really just trying to set the fair market value data point by having kind of a material transaction, but isn't really that concerned about some nominal amount being left out in the market, then the people who are out in the market who don't know are going to benefit from the uplift in value to fair market value.
So this would force a price correction because now there would be a transaction at this higher value. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. No different than when Elon bought, the Twitter stock. He didn't necessarily need to buy all of it to have the price of the Twitter stock. In fact, that's what the arbitrageurs do in that situation. It's like, oh, there's a potential transaction for 54.20. It's trading at 43. I can buy all the way up to, they get into the fractions of pennies, right? As long as there's a spread, they'll be basically trying to lock that in, that difference. But yes, it would basically imply the value. By the way, Molly, this is happening like every second of every day right now. There are transactions in XRP occurring that imply what the market cap is. That's the only thing that says our XRP is worth 41 cents or whatever it is, 40 cents today, is that there's been recent transactions which aren't material typically, that there's buying and selling at that price. So that's implying the entire market cap for even people who aren't on exchanges. Like most of my stuff isn't on an exchange.
So I just want to make sure this is clear because I've gotten this a couple of times. So if somebody decided not to participate for whatever reason, it wouldn't be harmed. If the worst case would be the price would stay the same, and the best case is that we now see a massive price correction because of these transactions. Is that correct?
That is one path. Again, I said it depends on
what's the other one?
With the buyer. So the other one's more of the dystopian path, that, this would be done basically to compensate, XRP token holders for the damages and all this type of stuff.
Okay.
And basically get them all, there's also a release of ongoing claims, which will be very valuable to the buyer as well.
What does that mean?
Well, it means you're wiping the slate clean, right? If I enter into this transaction with you, buyer, so I'm a ma and pa token holder, and I'm going to participate in this transaction.
Okay.
Part of what we've suggested that we think is going to be maybe the most desirable thing for the buyer is that they'll take those tokens claim free. Right? There's a release basically provided to them that, you won't be able to sue them for whatever comes out about the Hinman stuff, for example.
So that what you mean by claim, that we're saying that
Lawsuit, like that you have a lawsuit against them, a claim, that type of thing. It could be that, they're able to basically wrap their arms around enough, and that, they're going to, through regulation or something, basically make it illegal, or maybe, maybe they just call the damn thing a security, right? It's not that's not what they take in. Everything else is a security. That's what they're trying to do now.
Okay. So I don't want to scare people and make it seem like if you don't do this, then the dystopian outcome comes. So how can people kind of figure out for themselves whether that outcome is likely the dystopian or sort of what the best decision is for themselves?
I think you just need to look at what the government is doing. The government they've been maintaining this lawsuit. They've succeeded in library until this more recent hearing happened, where I guess the judge got the SEC in library I'm talking about to admit that the secondary trading wasn't securities transactions. I don't think that is a settled issue, by the way, but until that, they were seeking a permanent injunction on any trading in library token. And I would fully expect that that's their game in the Ripple case as well. That, it was their game in the was it Vertrusian?
Veritasium?
Yeah, Vertasium. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Vertasium case is that they basically set up a fund with what they disgorged from Mr. Middleton and basically offered a buyback. Right.
That's the thing.
So,
not everybody realizes we've already done a token buyback via the Very token.
That's right. This isn't like that far off. We've, not today, but we've talked about the gold confiscation back in the 30s. I think all you got to do is it's like the old thing. Don't listen to what they say. Look at what they're doing. And they appear to be trying to, stamp out this new asset class, kill it before it starts to rise in value.
So I just want to end on one just clear thing, because I think this has been a sad part about the last couple of days is when people kind of accuse you in this group of having bad intentions or manipulative intentions. So how can you kind of describe what your role is here in a way that is clear from any misconfusion, whatever?
I'm just trying to provide service to the people who've been harmed in the same way that I've been harmed. I've got this skill set. It's what I know how to do. Pretty good at it. And I'm just using it. Other people are creating videos and putting content out, or other people are writing white papers and things like that. This is just what I've done. I enjoy doing it, and it feels like it's a calling of sorts that I need to basically provide that service to the broader community for free, effectively. The odds of this ever occurring are very slim. It's very complicated. I recognize this is, maybe a fraction of a percent of ever occurring. But the more we rally around it and come together on it as a potential solution, then the odds start to trend the other way pretty rapidly. But I welcome any feedback, certainly constructive feedback. Being called, greedy or grifter or all those scam artists or anything, it doesn't really stop me from doing what I'm doing. It just muddies up the conversation. So
the sad part about this is that a lot of this corruption within the government has come out. We don't have anybody in Congress or in leadership roles standing up and advocating for us. So it kind of feels like if we don't do it ourselves, like who's going to do it?
I agree with that. None of my former colleagues are stepping up to do it. And it's troubling. I mean, so, I am literally a big law lawyer, corporate securities lawyer. I'm probably the only one who's basically gone on this side and started to attack the other direction. No one else seems willing to do it.
And I'm thankful for you, and I know many others are, because I don't know how to write those documents that you've written. And if you weren't here to do it, like, I don't know how the rest of us would be able to pursue that opportunity.
I don't think it'd be getting done. I just ended up in a unique moment in time where I had the availability. I wasn't continuing to bill hours and work all the time on M&A deals. There's certainly that's easier way to make money, as I could just go back to doing that instead of pursuing this quixotic quest to bring about this crazy thing, right? But it's what needs to be done for the time, and I feel like I have to do it. So
sometimes things worth fighting for are hard to fight for. This
that's
has
right.
not been an
That's
easy
right.
path.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Thank you very much, Jimmy.
Thank you, Molly. Really appreciate the time.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.